Hello and welcome to the Fighting Chance podcast. I am Carl Spiller, joined by my co-host Paul Pacino. In each episode, we will speak with a different individual from the world of sport or wider fitness community. We take the opportunity to discuss both the personal and observed experiences of our guests. This gives us an insight into their career highs and lows and how they improved and maintained their mental well-being. We aim to delve into the mindsets of our guests, discussing when they felt at their most vulnerable. We hope this will help us further understand how we can support ourselves and others around us. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy.
Sweet. Okay, so here we are for episode 2 of the Fighting Chance podcast. I'm joined as ever by Paul Pacino, and we've got current Charlton and Northern Ireland international Conor Washington. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I'm all good, thanks, guys. How are you?
Good, yeah, not too bad, mate. Not too bad. Not too bad. How have you been holding up during COVID?
Yeah, it's been all right. Been training, obviously playing the games and stuff. First lockdown was a bit harder, but this one's been pretty much back to normal, to be honest.
Sound. We wanted to get you on the podcast today. Thank you for joining us, by the way. So it's just, it's kind of almost like a rags to riches story because you came from non-league football, didn't you?
I did, yeah, quite late as well.
So to talk to us then, from the start, why do you think it took you so long to develop from where you were?
I think I never played academy football or did anything that way. I was just playing with my mates on a Sunday morning, really, and then I had a few trials that came and went at Norwich, Peterborough, probably 3 or 4 between those two clubs because of where I lived in between Cambridge and Peterborough. There's the catchment area is relatively small, so there's not too many clubs. But yeah, the trials came and went, and then I started playing for my local team, St Ives Town, at the under-18s, and then did really well there and started playing first team quite young, about 16, I think. So that's like what would it have been, step 9 or step 10, I think. So 5 leagues below the conference that was. And then physically, I grew quite a bit. I'm not exactly tall now, but I was a lot smaller then. Filled out and got to sort of 17, 18, and I was playing regularly and scoring quite a few goals at that level and really enjoying myself. And then got the opportunity to turn professional. And obviously, I think I must have been 19, 20, and you obviously can't turn that down. It was a great opportunity, and obviously 9 years down the line now, it feels like a lifetime ago.
How often were you training with St Ives when you first went there? I'm guessing it's twice a week, or was it less?
Yeah, so to be fair, we were playing most Tuesdays, most Saturdays. So I was a postman at the time, and then sometimes we'd train on a Thursday evening, but he was struggling to get the numbers there really. It was well run, but 5 leagues below the conference. Like some guys, everyone's working full time, so they might have just not been able to get out, or they had a job where they just couldn't train. So it was sort of intermittent, the training, but Tuesday, Saturday most weeks.
How did you feel, Conor, with that step up into sort of the professional ranks, that first game? What was kind of going through your mind that day?
I think my first team debut would have been Woking at home, I think. It'd just been such a crazy whirlwind, really. I think the thing I remember most about turning professional was probably the first training session, and also the night before that, sitting in the hotel in Newport thinking, Jesus, I'd got given a shirt with my name and number on the back, and I'd never had that, obviously, because at non-league you just play with a number on. So yeah. Had my own number, name on the back, and I just remember sitting in the hotel, obviously away from my family and stuff, and just looking at the shirt on the bed, thinking, oh my God, I'm actually a professional footballer. Or something at 20. Obviously, you think the time's gone really, but that first training session was just different level it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I think the enormity of what I was actually going to have to do and the level I was going to have to get to be able to kick it with these boys, really.
What was the capacity to Newport? Do you remember? Or do you know? Sorry, do you remember?
we used to get a good few thousand there. They're great fans as well. Brilliant club. Like a real community feel about it, and everyone's local, and you support your local team, and that was what it was. And it was almost a bit of a rags to riches story for them, to be honest, as well. For obviously, I went in the conference and then we got promoted, so they were in the Conference South, sort of languishing, and then Justin Edinburgh came in and sort of transformed the club along with the owner Les as well. And yeah, it was just nice to be sort of hanging on the coattails in that first year, because I was miles off it. I was nowhere near it. It's easy to look back with rose tinted glasses and say I got promoted, but I wasn't even on the bench at Wembley. So it was a tough period, and but at the same time, it was great to be a part of it.
They're a good little club, aren't they, Newport? Even now, even in today's football, it's great watching them in the FA Cup, because they always seem to have a decent little FA Cup run, Newport.
Yeah, the manager I played with him at, he was a centre midfielder when I was there. He's great. He's a local lad. And yeah, I mean, they still shouldn't be in and around. I mean, they're in the playoffs this year of League Two, which is incredible, really. It was amazing to think that we got into the playoffs for the conference and then managed to stay in League Two. So for them to be doing what they're doing, it's just incredible. And obviously, I wish them every success for the playoffs coming up.
Who have they got in the playoffs? Do you know yet?
Well, I'm not sure. I think, who's the other ones? Tranmere, Morecambe. I think they might have Forest Green, maybe.
Who do you fancy?
Got a fancy Newport, I know.
Of course you have.
I think you'd be castrated, mate, if you didn't say Newport. So would you say that transfer from sort of semi-professional to professional, would you say that was probably the highlight of your career?
Yeah, it's one of. I think there's definitely been quite a few. The biggest one for me is probably the Euro 2016. I think if you would have told me even probably 6 months before I went to the Euros that I was getting to the Euros, I wouldn't have believed you. So I think, yeah, that has to be it. And it's something I look back on with pride, and still have to pinch myself and realise I actually played at an international tournament.
So, what was it like making your international debut then for Northern Ireland? Because it wasn't really that long between. There's a few years, of course, but it wasn't really that long from playing semi-pro football to representing your country.
Yeah, I think it was 3 or 4 years, maybe. I've said this previously. Obviously, I get these questions quite a bit, and it genuinely just felt like such a whirlwind that at no point did I ever really stop and think, wow, this is actually happening. And it was just try and take it in your stride as well as you can, and make and maximise every opportunity, really. And luckily I managed to do that on the international stage by, I think I only played 2 or 3 games before the squad selection. So I managed to do enough in those 2 games to get myself on the plane. Do
you remember your first international goal? I knew it was against.
Yeah, that one. Probably my favourite goal ever. That one. Yeah. Slovenia at Windsor Park. Yeah, it was good, really good. It was only my second game as well, and it was incredible, really, because you look back at the team that played. I mean, Oblak was in goal. Managed to sneak one past him.
He's one of the top keepers in the world. Jan
Oblak. I know. Yeah, it's crazy. And then obviously the players I was playing with as well. It was only 4 or 5 years ago I was sat watching people like Johnny Evans and Stephen Davis on Match of the Day on the TV, and now I was playing alongside them, obviously. So yeah, it was an incredible experience.
What was it like in the camps with the likes of those players, with the likes of like Johnny Evans and stuff? I imagine, they come across as leaders on the pitch. What were they like in the training camps, in sort of the international setup?
Yeah, it's exactly that. They're just leaders, not necessarily particularly outspoken and geeing everybody up and going around slapping everyone on the chest sort of leaders, but they just lead by example. And I think that's been the biggest thing that I've noticed throughout my career is the players that have played at that top level are just consummate professionals. They do everything right every single day, and just that consistency and that discipline is what sets them apart, I think.
I mean, you went from. You done all right at Newport, but I think you moved to Peterborough. You banged in a fair few goals for them. What would you say was the difference? Was it the players you were playing with? Was it a different coaching style? Because you obviously kicked it in gear because you scored a lot more goals for them. So what would you say was kind of the catalyst for that?
I think it's a multitude of things, really. I played a lot of the time at Newport. I played off the side for starts. I played. It wasn't really until the second season that I started playing in a 2 because we changed formation and I started to improve as a player as well. So I sort of earned that right to play up front rather than off the left. And then I think because I'd only turned 20 when I went professional, I think there was so much for me to learn and there was so much improvement to be had in those early years that by the time I got to Peterborough, twice the player I was when I first got to Newport. So definitely that as well. And I think you've seen it with Peterborough over the years, the way that the club is run, the way that the owner likes to run it, and all the managers they've had there. The remit for them is play attacking football. And I mean, the business model, you would have to say probably, I mean, don't quote me on this, but is get strikers, get them scoring goals, sell them. So that, and it's worked for them, because the amount of money and the amount of players, and to be fair, the talent spot in there is obviously great, that they don't just pick anybody out. They pick these certain individuals that they think will score goals in their team that they can then move on for a profit, and obviously trying to achieve success alongside that. So there's definitely an element of that team was set up to score goals, and I was lucky enough to be a part of that. I mean, I played with Britt Assombalonga. He was the one to move before me, and then the next year the team was sort of built around my strengths and how I was going to score goals, and obviously that's what happened.
You mentioned, Conor, obviously there was a huge step up from the semi-professional world into the professional ranks. How do you still set yourself goals to this day, or how do you, what do you actually do to yourself to push yourself to be the best that you can be?
I think I've got myself in a really good routine of trying to emulate like the people I've spoken about, really. I try to do the right things every day to the best of my ability, because I think it'd just be such a shame if I ever looked back and thought that I'd wasted time, or I'd not got to the levels that I felt like I should have. So there's definitely that. And in terms of goals, like, I think it's an easy one as a striker, because you just set a target of where you want to be and just do it that way. But I think the age I'm at now, I just want to be involved in teams that are successful. Is basically it, really. There's you realise after sort of 9-10 years of playing that's what brings the most joy. I mean, even at Sheffield United, I wasn't really involved at all, but just to be in and around those lads every day and see what it takes to get to the level they've got to was a real privilege, and something that, like I say, even though I wasn't involved, that I'm still really proud of being there, sort of thing.
Do you regret leaving Peterborough?
No, definitely not. I wouldn't say I regretted any of the decisions in my career, to be honest. I think I've been relatively lucky in that respect. I learned a lot at QPR. It wasn't a particularly successful time for me or the club, obviously, but it was a platform to go and play at a level that I'd not played at. And like I say, I learned a lot. It was probably a really important time in my career that I was able to bounce back from, sort of thing, and helped me sort of shape the mental side of my game, I think.
Sure.
As you went up the divisions, Conor, what was the jump like each time? What was the one thing that you noticed, with each sort of division that you went up to?
I think the initial one was the worst by far. Going from non-league to for full time was incredible. I mean, I wasn't involved at all in the first couple of months. Played intermittently. I think I probably only made about 5 to 10 appearances so I signed in November until I think I signed 18 months or whatever it was. That's the first 6 months, didn't really play. And I remember going home and I said to my mum, like, listen, this isn't for me. I've got no chance of making it. I'm just going to go back in pre-season, give it all I've got. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And that attitude sort of, I felt like the reins had come off. The reins had come off and I was ready to go. And that attitude of just being free and I was fitter as well, which really helped, to be fair. That was definitely the biggest jump. And then going through the rest of the divisions, it's definitely not a technical thing. Definitely not, because I've seen players at all the levels that I've played at. Technically, you think, wow, you could play at the highest level. I think applications definitely one, and then I would say the game management side of it from a mental aspect. And physically as well.
Yeah,
definitely. The centre halves in the Championship are all enormous, quick, strong, and can play. And you don't really get so much of that in League One, and then it filters down League Two, etc. So,
and as you get to our level, Gino, they can't even run.
Quite right, Carl. Quite right.
During your time at QPR, you had a bit of time with Ben Gladwin, who's someone that I didn't play with him at 11-a-side, but I've done a lot of kind of football projects with him, just playing like 5-a-side. You could tell from an early age he had the ability, and I think Ben bounced around a lot of the academies when he was younger. I mean, what was it like playing with him? Because he's got quite a similar story to you, isn't he? In terms of like coming up from Marlow, non-league, and then working his way up to pro football.
Yeah, he's got he's similar to me. He's just a normal bloke who happens to play football, which was obviously really nice to connect with him on that sort of level. And we were both going through a tough time at QPR as well, because obviously both of our rises had sort of been upward trending until we got there, where we almost hit a wall. But I think it was there was a lot of different factors as to probably why neither of us were successful there. And it's only recently that they've sort of started to turn things around, to be fair, which sort of says a lot about the situation maybe. But yeah, he's great. What a brilliant footballer. Technically, one of the best I've seen, to be honest. The way you could glide past player was different level. And in League One, he was just an absolute standout. He really was. He's obviously been really unlucky with injuries, which has been a real shame for him. But he keeps coming back every time, which just shows serious mental strength in my book.
Ben Gladwin-Chino, I don't know if you've ever seen him or not, but he's so tall. What is he, 6'5", 6'6", something ridiculous. Like he's absolutely huge.
Yeah, he is big. He just glides around the pitch.
Yeah, and for someone that's so tall, so I think he used to do a lot of futsal when he was younger. His close control, it's just ridiculous. I guess the only player I can kind of describe him as is probably Adam Lallana with his close control. He's very similar to him, isn't he?
Yeah, no, it's a good comparison, to be fair. He's probably a bigger and stronger than Lallana, I would say.
Yeah,
he's trimmed down a lot actually. I played against him earlier in the season. I think from an injury perspective, he thought that maybe cutting a bit of the weight would help him. And yeah, he looked really good, looked fit, looked strong. But yeah, great player, both feet, serious passing ability, and like we were saying, just ghost past people.
You've not been having a great time at QPR, and you've gone to Sheffield United. Would you say it was a wrong move? Because I know you said that you don't regret anything, and you might not necessarily regret the move. But do you think going to Sheffield United, it was just too good of an opportunity to turn down potentially?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it wasn't working for me at QPR, and I'd spoken to the manager. I think it was Steve McLaren at the time, and he was brilliant. A great, seriously good coach, and obviously he's got a very certain style of play and the way he likes to do things. And I just had an honest chat with him at the start of that season and just said we just came to the agreement that I didn't fit into his plans, and my style of play didn't suit his sort of thing. So it was very much like let's try and find a solution. And obviously Sheffield United was one of the clubs that came up, and I think they might have been second at the time. And going to play, obviously I've been very privileged. The clubs I've played at are all enormous, really well known, really well backed, well supported clubs. So it was another one. Why not go up north and tick it off the resume? My missus wasn't overly happy about moving to Sheffield, but
gosh, yeah, I can imagine. So I was like, with things not going too well there, it's a bit different when you're doing so well. Everyone's obviously singing your praises, and especially started going towards like the Championship, and I can imagine for the Premier League it's even worse. But I mean, was there much online abuse for you not playing as well as what you thought you could have, or what others expected of you?
Oh yeah, it was incredible at QPR. It was something I'd obviously just never experienced. I mean, Peterborough's not even in the same ballpark of terms of supported compared to QPR, so it was just totally different level. I mean, you'd get the odd one at Peterborough. My Twitter following was relatively small, obviously, so you'd get the odd bit of abuse, and it was easy to switch off from that. But I mean, QPR was just a sort of a barrage of it all the time. I'd be posting pictures of me and my girlfriend at the time, or my wife now, and it was just like there was getting comments on that about the game and getting abused on Twitter, and it wasn't even necessarily around game days that you'd get it. So that I actually came off public social media around that time, because as much as I wouldn't say it was directly affecting me, my mood, or my family life or anything, it was just like every time I open Twitter up, there's 20 notifications, and 10, 12 of them might just be people abusing me. Like, did I really need that in my life at the time? Probably not. So it just felt like the right thing to do.
So obviously we all support the aim to kick racism and abuse out of football. And, many football clubs had the exile of social media for 3-4 days. Are we doing enough, or the club's doing enough? Is a simple 3-4 day sort of exile from social media enough of a stance against this? Because, I mean, there was a story in the paper literally the next day that, you know, as soon as social media went back online and all the clubs logged back on, Raheem Sterling was straight away racially abused.
Yeah, I mean, that racism stuff compared to the usual sort of Twitter rubbish you get is obviously a totally different level. And yeah, I would definitely say that not necessarily the clubs. I think the social media platforms aren't doing enough. They can't be. I think they're looking into algorithms and whatever that can hide stuff that's offensive, etc. But there's just no accountability, is there? You can sign up with a fake email address or whatever. So yeah, it's horrendous, isn't it? I mean, like me talking about the abuse that I've suffered compared to the top level, and obviously especially black players, is just not on, and something has to be done. And I think football's trying as hard as it can to do stuff with the knee and the obviously, like you say, the exile, but at the same time, it's just not enough, is it? And
No.
They need to be backed by the social media firms that they're going to stamp it out.
I mean, is it almost to the point now where we need to drop social media completely? For instance, when you start looking at the amount of abuse some of the players receive online, are these players too accessible now? I suppose is the question. Are the top superstars or the Premier League stars, the Championship players, people like yourself, are they too accessible now on social media? Can anyone can be found, sort of thing? Is it to the point where we need to drop it completely?
Yeah, it's a really interesting argument, isn't it? Because I think every football fan would probably argue that footballers aren't accessible, and they're so far away from being normal human beings now that because of the money, etc., and the fact that they feel like they have to be shielded from people, that everybody wants them to be more accessible. But when players do open up, they get this barrage of abuse. So I found Twitter. I came back onto Twitter a few months ago, and the Charlton fans and the Northern Ireland fans and just general people I've spoken to have been brilliant. Obviously, the results for Charlton have been okay, and I've had like a half decent season. So I can imagine that I will get the odd thing here and there. But in general, it's been good, and it's been good to interact with fans. I think it's a really important part of the game that's in the last 20, 25 years has just totally disappeared because footballers are here now and the general public are here. So, but I would say, obviously I've been in football a long time. I've played with lots of different players, and 99% of the guys are just totally normal human beings who don't want to get abused on Twitter. And they just happen to be very good at football. And that's why they do what they do. They're not a certain type of person that is impervious to this abuse. So,
what's your view on the sort of fan TVs that show up on YouTube now and the negativity that they bring around their clubs as well?
Yeah, I mean, I was an Arsenal fan growing up, so that Arsenal TV
so you know what we're talking about.
Exactly, yeah. Do you know what? I've not actually watched too many of their videos. I've seen a few bits here and there on Instagram, but I think the overriding emotion for them is just the frustration at what's happening on the pitch and also sort of upstairs, I guess. But I think
it must filter to the players, though, Connor. This must be something that is spoken about in dressing rooms, on the training ground, and things like that as well.
Oh, 100%. I mean, the abuse of Aaron Ramsey, for example, was just disgraceful. I mean, Piers Morgan was championing it. He was the one that was doing it, and you just think that's the thing that I've never understood is that you are a fan of that football club. How could you possibly be helping the situation at your club on the pitch if you're abusing the players and if you're feeding into this atmosphere where it's not conducive for them to perform? I mean, it's not the easiest thing to do, to be on a football pitch getting abused, heckled by your own fans, to then put on a performance like that. Those two things don't marry up.
No. Well, sticking on the back of that, what's the most hostile sort of environment that you've had to play in then? What's the most sort of hostile stadium sort of that you've played in?
I think the best atmospheres have been the ones at the Euros were great. I mean, the first game against Poland was brilliant. The wall of noise was incredible. In terms of hostility, there's not been too many. I mean, the Edinburgh Derby was a good one.
Yeah.
But I like
guessing.
that. I like that. When it's the opposition fans getting on you, that's brilliant. I mean, Millwall's a great one. But I enjoy that environment. When it's opposition fans, like that's great for me. But when it's your own fans turning on you, you can hear the moans and groans. I mean, at QPR, I remember one of the players came on. Like, this guy's played in the Premier League. He'd spent more time in the Premier League than anywhere else, and he actually got booed coming onto the pitch once as a substitute. Like, what chance have you got? I mean, this guy's played nothing less than Premier League football other than maybe 2 seasons in his career, and he's getting booed on the pitch. So
it's tough. Yeah, I imagine.
Obviously, with things not going too well at Sheffield, you were released at the end of the season. How does that conversation go?
Well, to be fair, I only signed the year there, so I knew that was always going to be a possibility. And I think with getting promoted to the Premier League and having only played something like 5 games worth of minutes, I knew it was coming. I hadn't been involved in the squads for the last 5, 10, maybe 15 games. So it was just a case of training, going to the games, playing some under-23s games when I could, and ultimately trying to plan for that next move, really. So it was a good conversation. I mean, the manager there, Chris Wilder, was absolutely brilliant with me. He gave me sort of glowing recommendations, and that's probably one of those things that we talked about. Moments you've been proud of was where I'd been out of the squad for however many games, but every day in training I was at it. Did everything that was required of me and more. Was still doing my own extras after. And any manager that's rung him since, I know he's given me a glowing report, which was obviously fantastic for me, and it was a real pat on the back for me to say that the things you're doing every day and this consistency is paying off. So, but it was the shortest conversation you'll ever have. I mean, obviously you've probably seen him on the press and the media and stuff. That's how he is. I think I went into his office and he said, "Thanks for all your efforts for this year," and I'm being deadly serious. That was about it.
He seems a very honest person. Like, he seems like a very honest sort of character.
Yeah, what you see is what you get from him. And luckily enough, I was at the stage of my career, and I am still now, where I'm totally happy to deal with people like that. Maybe younger, I might have needed more of an arm around me, and you can play at this level. And because there's always that self-doubt coming from the levels that I've come from, but being comfortable in my own skin now, so it's easy for me to have that relationship with managers. I want to be honest with them, and I want them to be honest with me. So,
did you think it was just a case of you had not necessarily the wrong manager, but do you just think it wasn't necessarily getting the best out of your playing style, or do you think at that level you just potentially have hit your ceiling?
I think it's an interesting one, because I think you look at people like Jamie Vardy. He's been involved in teams that are very much built around his skill set, and obviously he's as much of that. Has he earned the right to get that, or has that been a byproduct of the fact? Has his success been a byproduct of the fact that he's played in that team, for example? So obviously I've gone to Sheffield United, and then my position was filled by Billy Sharp.
Yeah.
Absolute
very experienced sort of player.
Sheffield United legend.
Yeah, legend. Yeah.
Goal scoring extraordinaire, club captain.
You made your debut, Chef, for United, didn't you? Replacing Billy, I believe.
I think so, yeah. I think it was at Aston Villa at home. And he was scoring all the time. I think he was nearly top goal scorer in the league. So I think he finished maybe second that year. But he was scoring it every week. So for me, it was a case of just coming on, doing what I can. But that team was set up very much in a certain way to get the best out of players like him, the wing backs, for example. So I was a different option, if you like. So I don't think that I was signed with the express point of view that I was going to be the number 9. I don't think that was ever the case. So it's very much a case of being me, Leon Clark, David McGoldrick, and Billy at the time. It was, can we share the workload between those 4? But ultimately, like, Billy was the main man. So
you've gone from Sheffield to Hearts. How does that conversation come about? Because you're obviously out of contract now, so you're looking for a club. Would you say it was pretty quick for you going to Hearts, or was it a bit of a dragged out process?
No, it's relatively quick, because I'd never been in that situation before, and I had a young family, so it's very much a case of can we get settled as quickly as possible? Because I'd like to be there on the first day of pre-season. Ideally, I wouldn't want to turn up halfway through and sort of be trying to get my own fitness in, integrate into the group, etc. So no, it was a really quick transition, to be honest, and it all started off relatively well. It was obviously another one of those seasons, much similar to Sheffield and the last season at QPR, where I felt like I learned a lot, and it taught me some lessons and made me appreciate a lot of things, I think. But obviously, ultimately, it was probably the worst season of my career.
In what sense was it the worst season of your career? If you don't mind me asking.
Well, we were a team that was predicted to be sort of top 4, top 5, ideally even higher, challenging the top 3. And obviously we end up getting relegated in some, obviously COVID, but I mean, we were down there for a reason. There's no arguments on my part that we shouldn't have been relegated, because we totally deserved to be. So there was that. And also the first time I'd ever been injured for more than probably a couple of weeks. I tore my hamstring. So I was out for 4 or 5 months with that. Obviously I'd done really well to get to 28, 27 without having anything, but yeah, that was a big learning process for me as well.
What was your opinion of Craig Levein then?
Yeah, he's brilliant. He's really good with me. I think he'd been around the club a long time, and I think the club was at a period where it wasn't sort of getting the success that maybe it wanted to, and the fans wanted it to, and ultimately everybody that was associated with the club wanted it to. I think it was obviously a string of bad results and not being able to get our best players on the pitch consistently. It cost us, and ultimately it cost him his job. But I thought he was great. I wouldn't have signed for him otherwise, and I was disappointed to see him go, to be honest.
What was your best moment in a Hearts shirt then?
Oh, nothing even comes close, to be fair. Scoring the Edinburgh Derby, that was about the only positive, I think, for me. Just never really got up and running. I mean, I hadn't played the whole season before. I wasn't really fit in terms of match sharpness. Just about getting up to speed and starting to feel sort of half decent, and then obviously snapped my hamstring, and then coming back from that was just a real eye opener. I mean, I was fit in the medical sense, from a clinical sense, that I was back on the pitch, but I couldn't have felt any further from it, to be honest. It was a good 6 to 8 weeks after that until I felt remotely sharp, and then we get hit with COVID. So
yeah. Well, during the time, obviously, during your time there, Celtic were quite dominant. What's the sort of mentality of the players playing in that league? Is it all, are they out to get one over on Celtic and Rangers? Is that the kind of the mentality of the teams? Do they know they're the two teams to beat?
I think they're definitely the ones you look forward to most. I don't think any team realistically thinks they're going to break the top 2, to be honest, unless there's some serious investment or like a real downfall for them, really. Yeah. I mean, the players they can attract, the wages they can pay is just, they're always good.
Different.
Yeah, they're always going to be the top 2. So it was an interesting league, because, like you say, you go from playing Celtic at their place to then playing Ross County away. So it's a really interesting one, and I don't think it probably gets enough credit for how difficult it is as a league, because every team has a certain way of playing. There's different surfaces. There's AstroTurf surfaces. There's like different stadiums, different conditions, etc. And there's been loads of brilliant players that have come out of that league as well. So I think I assumed that I'd be, having played in League One, having played in the Championship, both being physical divisions, I was of the opinion that I could go there and I would bed in relatively quickly. But it definitely took some adjusting.
What's it like then in terms of pressure? Surely the pressure's off on any of the teams below the big 2 in the Scottish League. So is that sort of, do you feel that as well? Is there less pressure on you to kind of to perform? And, does that actually help you then when you walk out into the pitch?
I think I've been lucky in the sense that I've played for clubs that have all, other than initially in my career, to be honest, with Newport and Peterborough, that have all been relatively high pressure. I think you probably don't appreciate it at the time, but then you realise when you go to other high pressure clubs, some of the lads can't handle it. So at Tynecastle, for example, at Hearts, we'd be 0-0 with Ross County at home, and we'd be getting booed off. and some of the lads are thinking, "Oh, what's going on here?" But I'm thinking, "Well, yeah, we've been crap." Like, that's exactly what you're going to get. We don't deserve any more than that. So let's roll our sleeves up and let's go after it, sort of thing. But I think, yeah, a lot of the lads had spoken about that Hearts being a really tough environment to play in, and in my head, I'm thinking that we did not get any abuse that we didn't deserve at Tynecastle.
Who was the best player that you've actually played with then, and who's the best player that you've actually played against? You know, you obviously represented your country. You've played for a number of clubs. Surely there's got to be a big name thrown in there somewhere.
Yeah, I'll definitely throw a couple at you. Just for, played with. There's probably three, I would say. Johnny Evans, obviously, brilliant. Stephen Davis, he's probably the best. Just slightly edges it, I would say. But also David McGoldrick at Sheffield United, technically, incredible. I couldn't believe how good he was. I think if he'd have just been a little bit quicker, I think, or you just had something else about him physically, I think he'd have been playing at the top level, because he's got every attribute you'd want, and really clever, really good to play with. And playing against the best performance, actually, it's probably joint performance and player, to be fair. Ozil in the 2016 Euros was different to anything I'd seen before in terms of operating in spaces where, I mean, we were playing a deep line and he was still finding pockets. It didn't make any sense. And then recently we played Norway and Haaland scored a hat-trick. So that was that was a good one. Yeah, I was actually on the pitch for that one, and I was sat.
As fast as he actually looks on TV.
I think he's quicker. Yeah, wow. He is a free. He looks like he's been created in a lab. He's like 6'4".
Yeah,
built like the side of a house, but can move at speeds he should not be able to move at.
He reminds me of Drogba.
He's like Drogba on steroids, I would say.
He's got an immense amount of pace.
He's frighteningly fast,
and his ability to finish is something else as well.
Yeah, and I think his general ability in terms of technical stuff, passing, touch, and that is probably undervalued because of how good the rest of his game is. But I mean, we were playing against him. I think he was 19 or 20, and you're thinking, obviously, players like Ozil and Cruz, and they're established international players that have been doing it for years. And this kid's 20. Like we said earlier, I just signed for Newport at 20, and this geezer's scoring a hat-trick on an international stage. So,
do you see him in England one day? Hopefully,
I'd like to think so. Yeah, I'm not sure if anyone could afford him. The money that's getting thrown around.
Yeah, I think everything you've said about him, his pace, his size, and just the way he's built, he seems suited, I suppose, to our game.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think you see it a lot with players like Werner, for example. The English game is so different to any other, and I think he's just starting to find his feet now. Yeah. But that's been the perfect example of the social media stuff, really.
Well,
Lukaku's the worst one. The worst one. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, this fella scored more Premier League goals than anybody, I think, by the time he was whatever age he was, 24. He scored. He's Belgium's top scorer, isn't he? He's 26, 27. Yeah. He was scoring 20 goals for Man United, and I mean,
scoring 20 goals for Everton.
Yeah, West Brom. I mean, he's 18, 19, scoring goals for West Brom in the Premier League, and you're like, this guy's getting abused, and he's getting told he's a bad footballer on Instagram. You're thinking, like, how does this make sense? But Werner's had the same thing. I think he's the first person since Hazard to get double figures goals and assists. And he's in a new league, and he's only ever played in one league before, and he's only 24, 25.
He's still learning the game, yeah.
Give the fella a chance. Like, they've only just started to look good under Tuchel for a start.
Yeah.
So I think it suits him, but that sort of as I was alluding to earlier, he needs to be in a system where they regain the ball and he gets played the ball quick, and he needs balls in behind defenders to stretch teams. And I think if you're a player like him in a team like Arsenal, for example, who's build up slower, or even Man City, I would argue, he wouldn't be as effective because that's not his skill set. So, and I think under Tuchel you're finding that now. Probably he's got a better understanding of how to use him.
So you kind of alluded to it beforehand when you were talking about the Tyneside game, that some players hear the pressure and they obviously start to pile in. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily the same with Werner, but do you think that football clubs could take a better approach to it potentially? Do you think they're doing enough to protect the players from the online abuse and from abuse in the stadiums as well? Because I know obviously during COVID we haven't had fans, but as soon as fans go back into the stadium, it's no different now as what it was probably a few years ago. They're probably still going to get abuse. So how do you prepare a player for that mentally if you can see that they're struggling?
Yeah, I think it's a $1 million question, I guess, because the amount of players I've seen that have got every trick in the book, everything you'd want from them, but on a Saturday they just can't transfer it onto that pitch for whatever reason. I think maybe the pressure and everything that comes with it might just be too much for them in that respect. So yeah, I think our club's doing enough. I'm not sure they could, in terms of obviously fan interaction. There's not too much they can do. Fans themselves obviously need to. It's going to be terrible for this next season. Is going to be terrible because they're going to be like caged animals, a lot of them. But I think we'll understand that as players.
Good luck.
Yeah. But it's 99% of them are great and they want to get behind you, and a lot of it's just that's their release for the week, isn't it? They've had a tough time Monday to Friday or whatever, and they want to go and shout at somebody on a Saturday. So,
is the money in the game a large part of this problem then as well? Do we expect just because I say a club pays 50, 60 million pounds for a player, we expect that player to instantly hit the ground running when, in reality, like we've just said, it's a very different league. It's a very different sort of system. And unless your system of the way you're playing with that team is going to revolve around that new player coming in, it's going to take them time to bed in.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Havertz is a great example of that this season. Because, I mean, they paid, 60? No, I think it was more, actually, wasn't it?
A little bit more.
Yeah, more for him. And the geezer's 21. I mean, they're not paying that's what he's worth right now. That's Leverkusen have chucked on, well, this is what we think he could be worth in 5 years' time. So
With
give us that.
I imagine as well.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, he's so young. He's probably only played professionally 2 or 3 years at the top level. And he's just starting to bed in now. And I think that the human side of football gets forgotten about a lot as well, because this fella's 21. He probably doesn't speak much, if any, English. I know the European nations are a lot better at speaking other languages than we are in our ignorance here, but he probably speaks very little English, I would imagine, being a 21-year-old from Germany. And he's having to come over to London, totally different environment, totally different culture, without his family. And like you say, the money is such a big part of that, because how many times do you see it or how many times do you hear it? Well, I would suffer that abuse for $100 a week.
Yeah.
Like, it's not quite the point, is it?
It's not. You're right.
He doesn't, every time he sees abuse in the stands, he doesn't automatically look at his phone and check his bank balance, does he? Like it just doesn't work like that.
It's a very good point.
It's so easy to say it. And then the interesting one I always find is, so say a player goes from my level to 40, 50 grand a week, that jump doesn't then make me impervious to the abuse that you're going to throw at me just because I've now earned more. It's a really strange situation, and I do understand where I've worked. I didn't come through the academy on 12, 15 grand a week when I was 18. I've worked and I've seen the other side of it, but at the same time, yeah, like it just doesn't compute in my head that earning a lot of money means that you should be a certain type of person, or you should be happy to suffer this sort of abuse, and that you're not going through real world problems as well. I think Lingard's been a great example of that. Lingard's on however much money he's on, but he was having to go home and care for his siblings, I think it was, and he was in charge of that, and his mum was having mental health problems. Just because he earns hundreds of £1,000s a week doesn't stop that from going away.
No, of course it doesn't. And I think the biggest problem is that there's a stigma on no matter how much abuse you get because you're earning a certain amount of money because you're rich. I mean, you look at the Premier League players; they're all they're all millionaires, or if not very close to millionaires. And if you're earning that much money, you've got nothing to be upset about. And it's like, well, it's not as cutthroat as you alluded to with Lingard. Like, he's still got a family. Of course, like if your mum or your brother or your sister, if any of them are being affected by anything, it's going to affect you. And on the flip side of that, let's take like for anyone that's getting issues on the pitch or off the pitch or whatnot that they're not necessarily taking to heart and it's not affecting them, it still affects those around you.
Yeah.
So I've seen it where players have got abuse and they've been fine, but their missus or their kids have seen it and it's affected them. And I think this is something that people don't think about. It's not just, yes, it's aimed at the person, but it affects everyone else around them as well.
Yeah, it's a brilliant point. I've definitely been affected by that. My mum still does it now. She doesn't tell me she does it, but I know she does it. she types my name in all the time at games, and my wife used to do it as well. We had serious conversations about like that she had to stop doing it because it's not good for her. It's not good for me. That like you can't, because 9 times out of 10 you would look into this person's Twitter profile and they'd be 12 years old or they'd be 45 and 30 stone and never kicked a ball in their life. But it was hard for them to see that abuse aimed at me, obviously, like you say, and it affected them, which secondhand obviously affects me. So.
Have you ever played with any teammates where this sort of online abuse or any abuse even for that matter, it's kind of affected them to the point where, they have needed a bit of an arm around the shoulder and you can see it seriously starting to affect their mental health?
Yeah, well, off the top of my head, I wouldn't say so, but because would it be the sort of thing that would be discussed in a dressing room? Obviously, like I would, when it was going on with me around the QPR time, it was, I like I said, I came off of there because it was just, did I need that in my life sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Did it affect my performances? Probably did. I probably went into games thinking, I hope I don't have a stinker today because I can't really be asked getting abused on social media. So yeah, I probably could have done with that, I would imagine. But at the same time, would it have made a difference, an arm around me at that point? Probably not, no. Because you have those doubts, like I said earlier, coming into the game the way I did. I jumped up 5 leagues and I thought, oh, Jesus, I don't know if I'm good enough to play at this level. Managed to establish myself there. Jumped up to League One thinking, I don't know if I'm going to, because it's not like I'd ever been told at 15, 16, I think you could make this level. So the conference was like, Jesus, like people around me were saying, wow, I didn't think you'd have got there. And then you go to the next level and it's like, wow, another jump. And then obviously it happened so quickly. It was like bang, bang, bang. Suddenly I'm in the championship and an international footballer. And obviously it didn't go well at QPR initially. I didn't score for 20, maybe 30 games or something. And at those points, there's just those nagging doubts, thinking, "Oh Jesus!" Like you said earlier, Carl. Maybe I've hit the wall, sort of thing. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is the level that I can't get to, sort of thing. But I've played 120 games, maybe at that level, and obviously international football as well. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I can't. There definitely will be players out there that it's got to them and it will have affected them. But will that have been spoken about in dressing rooms and openly? I doubt.
I think sometimes they can come down to the manager as well. Like if you look at Jurgen Klopp, I can imagine like the players daily get extreme positive reinforcement, whereas someone like, I mean, not to say that Mourinho isn't a supporter of mental health, but I can imagine he's probably a lot more cutthroat. So I think sometimes it can depend on sort of like the environment and those that you're working with and those who are kind of looking after you as well, because thinking of it from a duty of care point of view, they need to know if their players are feeling okay or not. Really, I mean, there's with you at Charlton now. Did those conversations ever happen, Connor? Like, did they ever ask how you feeling? Did they ever signpost you to places? Did they even make you aware of anything that's at the club for mental health?
I think we're really lucky at the moment with the manager we've got. I mean, Nigel Adkins is as positive and as involved as I've ever seen a manager, I think. And I think with being a manager, from my perspective as a player, an absolute tap-in given is the man management side of it. It's not hard to get to know players. It's not. And the first thing he did when he came in was over the course of maybe 4 or 5 days. So it wasn't even just one day where he was just going, hello, nice to meet you. What's your name? Where do you come from? It was over the course of 4 or 5 days, he was going for walks around the training ground or in his office, 20, 30 minutes, getting to know every single player. And like at the end of the day, we're all human beings at the end of the day. It's no different to any other workplace. If you don't feel valued or you do feel valued, the performance levels and what you're going to give you're going to give day in, day out is going to differ massively. It's no different. I think it's probably arguably more important as a footballer because there's so much pressure externally and internally anyway, that, like you say, getting an arm around, not even necessarily getting an arm around you, but feeling like the manager cares about you and knows you as a person could be the difference between a 6 and a 9 performance on the weekend.
The difference between a Jesse Lingard at Man United and a Jesse Lingard at West Ham.
Exactly that, yeah. But in terms of like, do the club signpost stuff for mental health? Probably not. I think if you genuinely wanted help and you felt like you needed help, I think the PFA and the clubs would step in. I'm not sure what they're doing in academies to prepare the players because I've never been through that route myself. But I think a lot of players will work with sports psychologists externally that felt like they needed to. I don't think there's too much taboo around that, to be honest. So
do you not have a sports psychologist at the club then?
No, not in a fixed capacity like that. No.
That's quite interesting. So is that because the level that you're playing at, or is it something that's if you need it, you kind of go externally and that's that?
Yeah, I think it's one of those ones where like football's so terribly balanced in where it puts its money that you've got these assets that are on this big wedge of money, and then you've got every single support staff that are trying to help these lads get to their peak performance every week are on this much, and there's 30 of them. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like physio side of it, sports science, S&C, like it doesn't make any sense. It's like buying a Ferrari and sticking it just in the middle of the road, isn't it? It's just ridiculous. And I think if you were from a cost cutting point of view as a club, sports psychologist, 30, 40 grand? Yeah, we'll cut that. Done.
Strange, isn't it?
But,
I mean, you'd think with the mentality side of the game, getting your players, there's a point to getting them physically at the peak, but surely mentally at the peak as well is probably just as important.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you see it with. I've been relatively streaky goal scoring myself, so from a mentality point of view, there's a place that I need to be at that I'm playing really well, and luckily I've managed to sort of find my way there myself over the past 18 months. Just being comfortable, like I was saying earlier, being comfortable in my own skin, knowing what I can do and what as a player, etc. And so yeah, in that respect, I've been lucky. But if I would have been able to find that place 5 years ago, my career could have been totally different. So yeah, it's a really strange one that more's not being said about it because I mean, we don't know half the capacity of what our brains can do, for example. And like you say, it's such an untapped market for it that I would imagine at the top level, they're leaving no stone unturned. But I've not managed to reach that level yet.
So have a bit of a chat about what you're doing now, then, Connor. So I know from myself doing it as well. So you're going for your degree at the moment. What's the thought process behind that? Do you have plans on? Are you wanting to use it for football in the future, or do you have plans to branch off?
Yeah, so the thinking's always been that I'm very lucky to have done what I've done, and realistically, would I have ever made enough money to retire? Probably not. And would I have wanted to? Probably not. To be honest, retire, do nothing. It doesn't really appeal to me, unless it involves copious amounts of golf. That is, but. So it's always been something that I've thought, what do I want to do after? So I've done my level 2 PT, done most of my level 3. I just need to finish that off. I've always liked that side of stuff even before I started playing. And then I thought I've done my A levels. I went to uni for a year before I actually started playing. but I was doing business and I just wasn't really passionate about it. So I was conscious that I needed to be passionate about what I was doing. And obviously sports science is something that's close to my heart and something that I actually sort of attribute quite a lot of my success to be honest, that side of the game. So would I want to work in football? Like I was saying earlier, probably not. Contact time, and you're always under the pressure of the manager and etc. And players don't want to do it a lot of the time. So I think ideally it'd be like a private setup where I've got genuinely committed athletes coming to me that I can help them improve physically. Would be the ideal sort of end game for me.
Listen, Conor, thank you very much for your time and speaking to us. We've got a lot of valuable information there as well. Achina, have you got anything else at all?
No, I just want to take the time to say thank you for chatting to us. It's been an absolute pleasure, Conor.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Really good. Really enjoyed that.
That concludes this episode on a Fighting Chance podcast. Remember, if you're interested in finding out more about what we do and what we have to offer, please check out our website or Facebook group, which will be added as links in the description. If you enjoyed the podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, for myself and Paul, thank you and goodbye.